In the early 1960s, somebody had a good idea. And that idea was, well, sure, if the US Army is preparing its new tank to fight against the godless commies in Europe alongside its NATO allies, wouldn't it be sensible if they developed a common tank with one of those NATO allies, like Germany, where they would be fighting? And that way you would save on development costs, you could save on logistics costs because factories producing the same spare parts and mechanics capable of repairing the vehicles at depot level would already be in Germany instead of having to look solely at Detroit as a place of supply, or maybe Ohio, wherever there is, they're going to end up building these things. Lovely idea. However, it was not to prove to be a shining example of international cooperation. Suffice to say, as is well known, it did not work. And eventually the Americans went off one way, they made the M1, and the Germans went off the other way and they made the Leopard 2. There are a couple of MBT-70s still out there. There's one in Fort Benning, which is not in the greatest condition. And they have one here at the Deutsches Panzermuseum in Munster. It's about an hour south of Hamburg. And this one seems to be in much better condition, so we're going to have a look at this one instead. There are a couple of minor detail differences between the two countries, so I'll get to them as we go around the vehicle. But the bottom line is this one's in pretty reasonable shape, so if we're going to have a look at an MBT-70, or in German the KPZ-70, this is the one to have a look at. So as ever, we'll go around the vehicle inside and out, a couple of parts, and we'll see what makes KPZ-70 work. Being a tank effectively designed by committee, there were a number of compromises made. Each country had its own desires, and the vehicle was an attempt to try to merge those desires. For example, the Americans very much wanted a 152mm shillelagh launcher. Now, this was a somewhat more capable gun than the one found on the Sheridan or M68-2. Yeah, it fired the same shillelagh missile, but they also realized that in terms of actual gun power, the little short, stubby one wasn't going to be sufficient. So they actually ended up going through an entire production process for new ammunition and so on for this gun. I'll come back to it. Another competing design requirement was that the Germans felt that it would be possible to better secure the crew if they were all in one place. That way you had one capsule of physical and radiological protection. Again, they were thinking nuclear battlefield. Most countries, when they came up with this concept, such as later on with the M1 TTB, or nowadays with a lot of the current designs, this capsule happens in the hull. However, they did decide instead that the capsule was going to be in the turret. Now, this also came with a liability in that you couldn't really fit 4 men into a reasonable sized turret. As a result, you could only fit 3 men inside the turret, and if one of them was going to be the driver, the one that went away was going to be the loader. As a result, the MBT-70 was designed with an autoloader system. It's the only way to get the full 3-man crew into a protected turret. Now, that's not to say that there's no protection at all on the front hull, but it was not much of a priority. And indeed, the ballistic testing of the turret in this was actually pretty good. You take a 105mm gun and you shoot it into the side and you'd knock out the tank, but the crew would survive. The results tended to be on the electronics, not on penetration and affecting the crew. I mean, it's still a complete firepower kill. The crew have to get out, but at least they survived long enough to do it, so they can get out and then presumably they all get irradiated by whatever. No matter. So as a result, as I say, the hull is a little bit lower than that of most tanks. You can see the Leopard 1 based hull off to the right next to it, and it's almost a foot lower because, again, there is no driver here. Now, this is not the first vehicle that I've covered that has a driver's compartment in the turret. Look at the Object 416. One of the differences, though, is that the 416's driver only had a certain range of motion. The driver here is in the turret with a 360-degree rotating capsule. Again, I'll come back to that when I get there. There was an additional one, the M53, M55 also had the driver's position in the turret, but the difference there was that it wasn't really intended to be driven as the turret is rotating, as it's an artillery piece. Anyway, no matter. So on the front, we have our traditional headlights. This is a very German type looking headlight. The The tracks are German. The two design companies, I should say, they initially started actually in their own separate countries. And so for the first 2 or 3 years of the design phase, the Germans were in Germany, the Americans were in America. And only in late 1966 did the Germans relocate to Detroit after 3 years of design and start working side by side. Oh, by the way, they didn't all speak the same language, and they all had different design processes and engineering processes and so on. So yeah, it didn't work all that great. Housing for the infrared white light spotlight, same as you would find again on a Leopard 1. And well, let's see what we got here. There's actually holes down here, whatever these sheets are covering. Your guess is as good as mine. So if you look on the top of the mudguard here, you're going to see a row of mounting points for a thing. Now what the thing is your guess is as good as mine, because it's obviously not on the vehicle. I had a look at some of the old photographs, and it looks like they didn't mount it in testing either. I suspect though it's something related to the track. Now if you look back just after it, you're going to see the mounting point for a side light. Well, it's not a mounting point, it is a side light. Now, in comparison to, let's say, the Marder directly opposite me, you don't see the indicator on the top, but it's very obviously the German bottom of it. Coming down to the track, it's by Deal. It's a twin pin rubber track block. The rubber track blocks can be removed by hammering or chiseling them out, as opposed to the American system where you got a bolt in it. I really don't know which of the two is better. It's probably both are equally bad or equally annoying when you're the poor schmuck who has to actually hammer or unbolt these things. Instead of the American type end connector, where there is a wedge bolt, in this case the bolt compresses the end connector itself against the shaped track links. And again, you compare it to the Leopard 1 track right next to me, you can see the Deal have very obviously kept the same family resemblance. When you get to the road wheels, now the road wheels are are not M60 or Leopard 1 style, at least the hubs are certainly different. I don't know if the wheels themselves are compatible. The suspension unit, hydropneumatic, sorry. So the vehicle is adjustable in height or pitch, and the way they do this is that the system is split up into 4 groups. Each group controls 3 road wheel stations per side. So there's a front left, a back left, a front right, and a back right. And depending on the amount of pressure you put to each part of the system, you can then get the tank to go left, right, up, down, or forwards, backwards. Now when you do this, of course, you are going to be changing the tension on the track. So let's say you compress the track, well obviously you got less, I wouldn't say less circumference, because obviously the amount of track link is the same, but you know where I'm going. You have to increase the tension to compensate. So if you look at the piston arm here, there's no grease point like in an American system. There's no nut to manually increase the track. It is done from inside, and it makes perfect sense that it will be automatically done. As you're lowering the suspension, you have to move the idler wheel forward to compensate and keep the tension. Otherwise, as soon as you go around the corner, your track will walk off. A bad thing. And presumably this means that there is a certain level of tension which is kept automatically. So think of maybe even a bit like the British Challenger 2, where the driver gets to control the tension as necessary. As you go further back, well, you're not going to see very much stowage, interestingly enough. Although you can, I guess, tie backpacks or whatever to these handrails here. Lifting mount, obviously, for the turret. This is part of the guidance system for the Shillelagh missile. So it's wireless. And once it goes off, now of course you'll see the parallax and the offset between the two. One of the issues with the Shillelagh was it had a fairly long gather range. So off the top of my head, it was somewhere around 500, 600 meters between when the missile was fired and when it came back into alignment with the sights, and you could actually then control onto a hit. And that was part of the reason why you had the conventional cannon ammunition still available, the heat rounds, for the short barrel on Sheridan M68-2. Mark 20 RH202 up top. Talk about that in a bit also. Again, German style smoke grenade launchers. There's a lot of German on this vehicle. Until you get to the back. At the back, you're going to have the bustle rack. Well, it's not the greatest bustle rack in the world, but at least it is one. And one of the major differences between the German and the American version in the MBT-70 is the powertrain. The original design in the American vehicles ended up using an AVCR 1100 of 1475 horsepower. Germans weren't so keen on this engine. For the German vehicles, they changed it out with a Daimler-Benz of 1500. And one of the big differences you're going to see if you're looking at a photo of a German versus an American one, other than the markings of course, is going to be the presence of the two large cooling fans of the German style on the German vehicle. Both of them, however, did meet up with a Renk transmission, again German, with 4 speeds forward and 4 speeds in reverse. Taillights, again, very German looking. I can really have a look at the photographs. I'm going to insert one now in the back of the American vehicle just to see if they got the same taillights or if they went with American style taillights. Other features on the back of the German vehicle, well, you have your German style convoy light. There's your toning pintle down here. I have no idea what you access when you open this up. Infantry telephone, and yeah, this bolt is utterly bent and not coming out. Another interesting feature though on the German vehicles is that the mudguard can be folded up to half height. When you're really going off-road in combat and you don't care all that much about the mud being thrown up, then fold up the mudguards and it reduces the damage that you can sustain to them. Coming back the equally sterile right side, and again I will caution you that a lot of trials vehicles, they didn't bother with a lot of the external stowage because they're still just trying to figure out, does the vehicle work, let alone where do you put stuff on it. We'll see the fuel filler port on the right hand side. There is one on the left hand side also. A difference though between the two is the little fan or exhaust system that you have on the two different sides. So the left side, nearest I can tell, it's an auxiliary motor. The right side, I would suspect it's for the NBC system. Radio mount, again, more of these handrails, and well, that's it. So to continue on with the slew of optics up top here, you've got the gunner's primary sight, you have the commander's night vision sight, and the commander's panoramic sight, as well as an old-fashioned periscope. Now, for whatever reason, they've decided that the commander's night vision sight is one that can be raised and lowered. Although looking at the way this has been painted in, it has not been raised and lowered in many, many decades. But there is a very obvious indication as to how it was done when you get inside, and frankly why they did it, I don't know. Also, you got your 3 hatches, so driver, gunner, commander. Now, in fairness, for a museum vehicle, the hatches work. So the gunner's hatch on the right, it's on a spring system, so it's not too hard to lift up. But you see just how thick the armor is on this, both the metal and the liner, I would presume. On the other hand, the driver's hatch, not so thick. In fact, I'm not even sure it's a real hatch, looking at it with this little lock here, and it almost feels, I mean, it's too well shaped to be a restoration, I would say. I think it probably was originally built like this, it's thin. But maybe it was also a matter of keeping the weight down because of the counter-rotating capsule that the driver was sitting in. Then the TC's hatch, well, also nice and thick. You got your 6 periscopes around the outside. Got to have your rotating orange light, mandatory in Germany. And looking at the bustle where the autoloader ammunition is, I don't see blowout panels, but that maybe when I get inside, I'm going to see a compartmentalization. So that's it for the outside of the MBT-70. Come back in a week or two and we'll take a look around the inside. Take care. The tracks themselves are of the German type. They're by Deal, very similar to the Leopard 1 track to my left. Instead of a wedge bolt holding the end connectors in place, the bolt itself. Thank you, I think. Now if you have a look at the front of the mudguard, you're going to see a line of